we're going to shift gears just a little bit, but stay on the same highway. And we're going to bring in from NAR Alexia Smokler. So Alexia Smokler is the Senior Policy Representative for Fair Housing at the National Association of REALTORS. She represents NAR's position on fair housing to Congress and federal agencies and manages NAR's ACT initiative, which emphasizes accountability, culture change, and training to advance fair housing in the industry. Before joining NAR, Alexia worked in fair housing enforcement at HUD on a congressional staff and with several nonprofit civil rights organizations. Thank you very much for joining us today, Alexia.
Thank you, Andy, and good morning, Indiana. It's great to be with you virtually from Alexandria, Virginia today. And I want to thank Bill Dedman for his important groundbreaking work over the decades and for sharing it with us this morning. My name is Alexia Smokler, and I am the Senior Policy Representative for Fair Housing at NAR. My position is new. I'm part of a fair housing team at NAR that didn't exist a year ago. As Bill just told you, we've made fair housing a priority. It hasn't always been so. Like much of America, it's been a journey. But today, in 2021, we believe the real estate industry has a special role to play in the fight for fair housing. We have acknowledged that our historic actions, along with those of government, the financial industry, and others, help to create the racial dividing lines that still exist in so many of our communities, and a racial homeownership gap that is the same today as it was in 1968, the year the Fair Housing Act passed. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but we're committed and we believe there is a lot we can do. Today, I'm going to tell you about how NAR is putting that commitment into action. I'm going to share with you some of the fair housing resources we've been developing for you. I'm going to talk about the importance of fair housing to our businesses, our communities, and the American economy. And I'm going to add in some fair housing history as we go, because it's so important for us to understand the context. So in November 2019, Newsday published its investigation, and it rocked us. As Bill just showed you, the investigation found that real estate agents in Long Island treated white testers and testers of colors differently in 40% of the interactions, almost 50% of the time for Black buyers. We know this isn't just a Long Island problem. These results have been replicated in other testing studies conducted by government, academia, and nonprofit agencies. So back in 2019, when this investigation was first published, we knew immediately that we needed to do better. And that's when we launched our ACT Fair Housing Initiative. ACT, as Andy mentioned, stands for Accountability, Culture Change, and Training. It's a package of industry reforms and tools for members, brokerages, and associations, shoring up our own house. Part of it is to make sure we are holding real estate professionals accountable when they violate fair housing laws. But also, we want to move hearts and minds so that equal service is something that is woven into the way we serve consumers and the public. And so that when we say realtors and the realtor difference is about holding ourselves to a high ethical standard, upholding fair housing is a core part of that. What we're telling realtors is that yes, fair housing is the law, and it's your ethical commitment as a licensed professional and a member of this association. But also, it's good business. Making homeownership accessible to the broadest possible group of qualified buyers is good for business, it's good for your community, it's good for our economy. Nationwide homeownership growth over the last 10 years has been driven by Hispanic Americans. And it's predicted that homeownership growth over the next 20 years will be driven by Hispanic Americans, Latinos, and Latinas. We have to ensure that we are providing those customers with equal service and not treating them differently in 40% of interactions. I'm going to post a link in the chat box with some data, and watch that chat box because I've got lots of links for you guys. So there are millions of qualified, mortgage-ready Black and Hispanic millennials who are ready and able to purchase a home, but they're renting, they're living with parents or roommates. That market is not being served, and that's an opportunity. The racial homeownership gap that I mentioned, a 30-point gap between Blacks and whites, the same as it was in 1968, the year we passed the Fair Housing Act. Here's another link for you with some data. We know that the racial homeownership gap is a large contributor, if not the biggest contributor, to the racial wealth gap. Even though Black Americans earn about 60% of the income of white Americans, they own only about 12% of the wealth. Those lost chances to build equity in homes going back generations means that people today can't necessarily rely on the sale of an existing home or family support for a down payment, or to invest in a small business, or to send a child to college. But what I want everybody to understand is that the harms of discrimination and segregation, they aren't limited to just certain groups. They hurt all of us. When some people are held back from the benefits of homeownership, from building wealth and realizing their full potential, it stifles economic growth. It shrinks the size of the pie for everyone. Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, and the Fed have all published studies showing how housing discrimination hurts the economy, keeps millions of qualified buyers out of homes, and limits job creation. Here's another link for you if you want to go deeper on that. So as we look to the future of our industry, of our communities, and our larger American economy, let's remember we all lose out when people are unfairly denied homeownership. That's why NAR is committed to confronting the barriers that keep qualified buyers out of homes and to redouble our efforts to provide equal service to all. So let's talk about what NAR is doing to advance homeownership in the neighborhood of choice for all qualified buyers, regardless of their background or identity. ACT. The A is for accountability. As Bill mentioned, we are creating a self-testing program for brokerages who want to voluntarily test themselves for discrimination. This would allow them to uncover and address problems confidentially before a newspaper or a private fair housing group does. Also, on the accountability front, we've reviewed the real estate licensure laws of all 50 states and 4 US territories for their fair housing education and enforcement requirements. There is great variability among the states on these metrics, and we've developed a set of fair housing best practices for licensure that we've shared with our state association AEs and government affairs directors so that they can take a look at their licensing law, compare it against the best practices and other states to see if there might be room for improvement there. Some states have already begun moving to strengthen their licensing laws. Now, the next two prongs of ACT, culture change and training, they work in tandem with each other. So with culture change, we're very excited about a new video series we've just launched of realtor fair housing champions who embrace fair housing as a part of their business strategy. We're calling it Being the Change. And here in the chat box, I'm going to post the links to the first 3 videos in that series. We intend to keep producing these videos, and we're soon going to be announcing additional ways we'll acknowledge realtors who are fair housing leaders to ensure that our industry culture is one that applauds and celebrates fair housing. We're also introducing new and innovative training opportunities for realtors. So in June, we launched a 50-minute training video on implicit bias in real estate, which is available on our website. And here's a link for you. Yes, Teresa, we can get you the links after the presentation. You can also download the chat window, but we'll make sure those links are available. So Bill mentioned implicit bias. It's true that if you discriminate based on explicit or implicit bias, it doesn't matter in court, you still discriminated. But if there's something that we can do to confront our own biases, we want to do that. So implicit bias, it's the way that our brains automatically and often without our awareness attribute stereotypes. It's usually to people that we're not familiar with. So we haven't learned about them from personal experience. We all do it. It's just the way our human brains work. It's a shortcut to help us categorize things quickly and make sense of all the information coming at us. But it can be a problem because a lot of those stereotypes aren't based on reality. They're based on media and culture. They're not true. And so even as our conscious minds may hold fairness and equal treatment as cherished values, our unconscious minds may be causing us to treat people differently or unfairly without our even intending to. Now, following up on the video that I just posted, we are launching a 3-hour classroom course on implicit bias that goes even deeper for CE credit. We have piloted that training in 3 states. We're now adjusting the content, and in December, we're conducting a train the trainer. We're going to have trainers ready to offer this course early next year. We will be offering a preview in San Diego for those of you who are attending our annual conference. And then you might have heard about something we launched at last year's annual conference called Fairhaven, a fair housing simulation. As Bill said, Fairhaven is really a new approach to fair housing training. There isn't anything else like it. We decided to create it not long after Newsday was published. As you saw in those videos Bill shared, more than one agent referenced their training. They talked about steering. They named it. They said, I'm not supposed to, and then they did. Something wasn't connecting. We could see that we needed a new kind of fair housing training, something that really resonated, to teach not only the substance of the law, but also to move more people to embrace it. And that's how we came up with Fairhaven. It's not your typical lecture and quiz. There's no lists of laws and provisions to memorize. We wanted to give members a chance to practice applying fair housing principles in scenarios that feel real. And so as we developed Fairhaven, we reviewed real fair housing cases, and we talked to members about their frequently asked fair housing questions, situations they run into every day. Now, a very special feature of Fairhaven is that the learner is also put in the shoes of a client who is stopped from buying a house because of discrimination. You'll see things from the client's point of view, and confront the decisions that that client may have to make. So now I'm going to share my screen and give you just a little peek inside. So bear with me while I set this up here. Okay, here we go. So the fictional town of Fairhaven, it's a beautiful place. Modern design, gorgeous graphics. It's a pleasure to be there until you run into all the discrimination going on. Learners in this fictional town take the role of an agent. Their goal is to sell 4 homes in 6 months. As learners work against the clock to close deals, they encounter different kinds of discrimination. A seller backs out of a deal after learning the buyer is Black. A condo board won't let a buyer who uses a wheelchair build a ramp to access the lobby. You're hosting an open house with prospects of different backgrounds. Did you treat each one the same? Learners will reach decision points as they interact with clients and colleagues. Those decisions affect the outcome. If the learner's choices align with fair housing principles, she gets a sale. If the learner's choices don't, she'll have an opportunity to course correct. She'll get fed more scenarios and have more opportunities to close deals until the time runs out. Along the way, learners have the opportunity to click out to view additional resources if they want to learn more. Now, sometimes in Fairhaven, we flip the script. The learner now finds herself in the shoes of a client on the receiving end of discrimination. Your agent was really nice to you on the phone, but when you come into the office and she sees the color of your skin, her demeanor changes. When an agent learns you're gay, she discourages you from moving into a particular neighborhood. Your agent keeps trying to steer you to a neighborhood where people of your national origin live, even though you've told him it's a long commute to your office. Each client point of view scenario is followed by video testimonials from real people who have experienced housing discrimination. With these powerful stories, Fairhaven aims to affect learners' emotions, to open them up to see and even feel the harm that discrimination causes in real people's lives. With this training, we're asking learners to open their eyes and their hearts, challenge some of their own biases, and motivate deep reflection and ultimately behavior change. So we've set the bar high with Fairhaven. It is our goal for learners to come out of this experience seeing the world a little bit differently. Learners have told us they got angry or tearful when experiencing the client's point of view. They've told us that Fairhaven opened their eyes, given them new tools, and given them more motivation to stand up for clients in situations where something doesn't feel right. You know, the Newsday investigation focused on agents running afoul of the Fair Housing Act. But in Fairhaven, you will see there are many situations where it is another party in the transaction that is engaging in discrimination. And you have to know how to protect your client. We're very proud of what we have created here, and I would encourage all of you to take a visit. It is available to all NAR members as a free member benefit. And I am posting the link right there for you. So when we talk about fair housing, we like to say, first, do no harm. Compliance with the law. That's the minimum you can do. Don't make this problem worse. Make sure you have standard policies in place so that you are treating every client with the same level of professional courtesy and service. Let the client lead you in their housing search. Don't make assumptions about who should live where. Use objective information from reliable third-party sources when you talk about things like neighborhoods, crime, and schools. Don't impose your subjective opinions about what constitutes a good neighborhood or school. That could mean different things to different people. As Bill mentioned, test scores only get you so far. Test scores tell you about the income and the education level of the parents. They don't tell you if the school has a great marching band. They don't tell you if the school has great supports for kids with special needs. They don't tell you if kids in that school have a trusted adult that they think that they can talk to. Educate your clients on their fair housing obligations. If you have a seller who is letting a buyer's race, national origin, or other prohibited characteristic influence their choice about who they sell their house to, that seller can be liable under fair housing law. And if you keep representing them, so can you. So first, do no harm. But second, repair the harm. You know, the Fair Housing Act of 1968 made housing discrimination illegal. But before the Fair Housing Act, decades of government policy and industry practice had locked many qualified buyers out of homeownership. For generations, these buyers were shut out of the opportunity to build equity and pass that wealth down through their families. The 1968 law didn't provide any remedy for that. So there's a lot of lost ground to make up for. And sadly, we haven't done it yet. I heard a saying recently, a head start beats running fast. Over decades, federal programs helped many white families realize the benefits of homeownership and pass those benefits down to their children. Other families who weren't white were denied those opportunities. Bill mentioned redlining. The federal government during and after the Great Depression wanted to shore up homeownership. It would insure loans if banks provided affordable mortgages. But under the federal program, banks were advised not to make loans in a neighborhood where a single Black person lived, unless that person was a servant. Under that policy from the 1930s until 1970, 98% of FHA loans went to white borrowers and white neighborhoods. 1970. This isn't ancient history, folks. Some of those loans might have gone to the parents of people in this meeting, while some other people in this meeting, their parents could not get one. After World War II, the federal government ensured the financing for developers to build the suburbs and paid for the highways to get there so that the returning GIs and their families could buy affordable new homes. Those GIs' mortgages were backed by the federal government. That time after World War II, that was when America transitioned from a land that was majority renters to majority homeowners, thanks to those federal policies boosting homeownership. But those new developments all had racially restrictive covenants written into their deeds. It was a condition of the federal financing so that a Black veteran who had served his country couldn't move in. Only a handful of the 1 million Black World War II veterans received assistance to buy a home under the GI Bill. The Black veteran was sent back to the segregated neighborhood where banks wouldn't lend. If he could scrape together enough money to buy a house, its value didn't appreciate very much because our government and our society had decided not to invest in that community. Meanwhile, the cheap, subsidized houses out in the new suburban developments appreciated quickly. My grandfather, David, came back from the European theater and bought one. He could build equity and pass that wealth down through my family. My family could help pay for my education. Other families couldn't do that. Now, let's talk about student loan debt for a minute. It's a huge obstacle for millennials trying to put together a down payment. Because of the skyrocketing costs of college, young people today have more student loan debt than their parents or grandparents ever had. It's been described as a crisis. NAR research found that Black households are more than twice as likely as white households to have student loan debt, and they have more. We just put out a new report on the impact of student loan debt on young home buyers. This is the future of our industry. Putting a link for you in the chat box. How else does that failure to accumulate intergenerational wealth play out for Black buyers today and other buyers of color? Our research shows that white families are more than twice as likely as Black families to rely on the sale of an existing home for a down payment. Our research shows that Black households are more than 3 times as likely as white households to tap their 401k for a down payment. I'm about to post the link for you. These are folks who played by the rules. They went to college, they saved for retirement, but a head start beats running fast. Now, I also want to take a moment here to talk about the history of the real estate industry. Our code of ethics in 1923 said, it's unethical to sell a home to a person of color in a white neighborhood. You could be disciplined for that. That was our official policy for decades. We organized campaigns to put racially restrictive covenants into deeds, saying that no person other than a person of the Caucasian race may buy this house. And we opposed passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. That's our history. We've come a long way since then. As Bill showed you, we still have a way to go. Here in Washington, we're advocating for policies to make homeownership more accessible for folks who are making up that lost ground. The policies we support would help a broad range of home buyers who can afford the monthly payment but can't get over some of the initial hurdles. Down payment assistance, treating student loan debt differently under the tax code, alternative credit scoring models to help those folks who are considered credit invisible when they apply for a mortgage, even though they've been paying the rent and the utility on time for years. Expanding support for homeownership counseling to help turn a no into a not yet. We're working in coalition on these policy solutions with a group of industry and housing advocates ranging from the Mortgage Bankers Association to the NAACP. It's called the Black Homeownership Collaborative. And here's a link to the website. I would encourage you in your practice to think about how can you help make homeownership more accessible to those who are making up that lost ground. Can you help a first generation home buyer? Can you reach into a neighborhood that's historically been disinvested? This is hard, necessary work that continues. And we plan to offer more resources in the near future to members who want to get more involved. So I'm wrapping it up now, but I'll leave you with one final thought. Implicit bias training teaches that the number one thing you can do to stop thinking about people stereotypically is to form lasting interpersonal relationships with people across lines of difference, not just at work, in your personal life. So my final word to you is get out of your comfort zone, expand your circle, make new friends who've lived a different kind of life than you have. Invite them into your home and go to theirs. listen to them, and learn from them. Now, I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'm happy to take any if we do.
Oh, Alexia, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Between you and Bill, you've shared so much great information here with us this morning. I want to thank you very, very much for joining us as stewards of the American dream of homeownership and advocates for private property rights. I mean, we're the only ones that advocate for homeowners themselves, right? We believe in fair housing, and that's why we need to. Fair housing creates opportunity in our communities and unites us as citizens. That's why we're committed to upholding those fair housing laws, a commitment we show through regular review of those laws, a strict adherence to the code of ethics that condemn discrimination. And in fact, we're proud to say that the Realtor Code of Ethics goes farther than fair housing does, including sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes. I think that's just right. It's an example of why we as realtors are setting the bar for those to follow and protecting our communities. Can you tell us a little bit more about implicit bias classroom training that we can offer here in Indiana?
Yes, so this training is going to be offered by the Center for Realtor Development, formerly known as CSRE. So if your association is a licensed provider of CSRE content, like At Home with Diversity, you can reach out to us to offer this training. Our first cohort of trainers that we're training are some of our most popular At Home with Diversity instructors, like Robert Morris, Matt DeFanis, and Margot Wheeler. We're really excited, and they're really excited to learn this new content. They're going to go through a 2-day intensive training to learn how to coach folks into talking about these very difficult questions that we all struggle with, so that they'll be prepared and ready to bring this content to you in the new year.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very, very much, Alexia. Loved having you here today, and want to wish you well wishes. Hopefully the weather's better there than it is here in Indianapolis, where it's a rainy day, but what better day to cover things like this. So wanted to just stop and shift gears here just a little bit. Want to tell you about the action steps that we've taken at IAR. So we've offered At Home with Diversity throughout the state. We're going to continue doing that as well. It's a fantastic course. Please look into it and consider taking that in advance. We also required that our staff here at IAR take that course, and I think a lot of them took a lot of great takeaways from that to know how we're seeing the industry as practitioners, and also how best to help support us in their roles at the association here as well. Our very own Lori Ladow has been active in chat. I've been loving seeing her in here. I know I saw a screenshot the other day on social media of Lori recording her next session that RACP is going to offer, which is going to be in next year's courses that covers fair housing and what we can do to prepare for any pitfalls that may come in front of us. So thank you very, very much, Lori, for what you do for our industry. Also, all members of our leadership team have completed NAR President Charlie Oppler's challenge to complete both the 3 components: watching the implicit bias videos, participating in an At Home with Diversity course, and also completing that fair housing online simulation. And I will tell you, if you're looking for something today to open your eyes, that fair housing training is fantastic. It's really, really great. It takes about an hour to complete. You get to do it on your own. It's gamification of fair housing. So check it out if you have the time and the chance. Make some time to do that.